Pacific War, the Admiral Foundation, welcome to Pacific Combat. Thank y'all for coming today. Now, we have a mission you guys have to accomplish. Somebody keeps telling me it's going to rain. Welcome to the Pacific. Oh, by the way, that thing leaked. I just thought I'd throw it in there. All right, so before we get started, have you guys all got earplugs?
Yes.
Outstanding. We're going to be shooting blank ammunition. In order to get the weapons to work, the ammunition is hotter and louder than live ammunition. So when we tell you to get your ears on or get ready or stand by or whatever they tell you, you'll know. So the first time you miss, you're going to go, oh my gosh, get those in there. So here's the rule. Make sure you get your earplugs on. If you lose one, Gene down here's got extras, or the good Lord give you these. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you brought little ones with you, make sure they put them in these orifices only. They're not edible. And ladies, and I direct this to the ladies because guys wouldn't dare do this. If you brought your pet poodle, he ain't gonna like you. Okay, so just be prepared for that. Now, on another note, our Marines are trained to say one word if there's a real injury out here. It's called medic. And I have a retired Navy medic person that's with us that will take care of them. Plus we have shovels. No, just kidding. And in that, when he says medic, his partner's going to do this. That means, come to me, I've got an injury. We will respond in kind and take care of that person, okay? That means don't run up here on the battlefield and try to help me. If you're a doctor or a nurse, and you like to identify yourself, I would have had you. But please, come right here and say, Marvin, I'm medically trained, I can assist you, but it's bad enough that we need you, okay? Please, don't come up on the battlefield. It's not only the weapons that shoot, there are 60 ground charges out here that you walk through the show. You are going to be in the middle of the battlefield at Tarawa, and it's going to go boom, bang, bang. Okay, so don't come up here. Now, to say this, if one of you has a medical problem, and your partner sitting next to you, and they go, medic, and they do this, we'll come to you. But please, don't everybody do this. It looks stupid. Okay? Now, not to be undone there, if I do have a problem, we started this program in 1991. If I do have a problem, and I have to evacuate the site, and I've never done this, but we're trained, we're going in a proper, proficient military manner, go this way around this building. We'll split in half, go this way around the building, and there's a 300-year oak tree back there that's waiting to have a picnic. Okay? My team is going to set up a perimeter to help escort us back that direction. Everybody with me? Don't go out that gate, and for God's sake, don't come up here, because that's right where the problem is. Alright? So we want to kind of ease off and go that direction. If you have cell phones, PDAs, iPods, and all that, they're targets for me. Turn them off or put them on vibrate. They don't exist in 1943. Alright? Everybody with me on that? Everybody with me on that? Yes. Got it. Okay, I want to make sure. So, without any further ado, we want to get the program started. Are you all ready this morning? Yes. Good. Raise your right hand, please. Thank you. You just joined the United States Marine Corps. Yeah. Oh, boy, I get the Navy that time. I've never done that. You know, every time I do that, it gets that same response. People laugh and have fun. But folks, I want y'all to sit back here a little bit, relax. I think you just went to a nice place to sit and reminisce about World War II, what it was like. And I've got some veterans out here that were there that will tell you firsthand. It was not fun. It was not games. You live in the United States of America today. You live in a free country.
Yes.
Because men and women have gone before you.
Yes.
Earned that right to business. This program is designed to educate mostly our young, but we realized 20 years ago it also educates everybody about the sacrifices of Americans defending our flag. It's a history of the United States in a capsule that you're going to get to see today. So please, enjoy the program. Get ready.
It's great to see these World War II veterans in front of us this morning. Thank you so much. Germany and Japan, continuing to spread their influence throughout Europe and Asia, the United States was holding fast to its isolationist policy. America did not want to get involved in that conflict. Prior to the United States entering the war, President Roosevelt had called on America to be the arsenal of democracy. And our role, prior to entering the war, had been primarily the lend, lease, and sale of war materials to Great Britain, and later it would be the Soviet Union. But ladies and gentlemen, that all changed on the morning of December the 7th, 1941. When Japanese forces launched their surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. What the Japanese hoped to do would be to cripple the United States Pacific Fleet, which would then give them free rein to finish their conquest in all of Asia. That morning, they destroyed or damaged all 8 of our battleships, over 200 aircraft. 1,200 Americans were wounded, 2,400 Americans were killed. Now, they only temporarily crippled the Pacific Fleet that morning, in part because of some things that they missed or just had no reason to go after them. The first one, and this was just sheer luck. Our aircraft carriers were not in the harbor that morning. They were out at sea. They were safe. 2, they didn't touch any of our submarines that were in Pearl that morning. And our submarines played a very vital role in the early days of the Pacific War. 3, our ship repair facilities. I have to say that slowly. They didn't touch them. So that allowed us to take those damaged vessels and quickly get them back up to speed and get them into action instead of having to tow them to the west coast of the United States to be repaired. And the last thing, they didn't go after our storage tanks. So we had plenty of fuel to get them started there at the war there in Pearl. The following day, President Roosevelt goes before Congress and asks for a declaration of war against Japan. 3 days later, Germany declares war on the United States. Now we find ourselves in 2 wars on 2 different continents, and folks, America was not ready. When we entered the war, we had 2,500 airplanes, around 800 ships. The United States Army consists of just over 1 million men. The Navy and the Army Air Corps each had around 300,000. The Marine Corps, 70,000. Coast Guard, 25,000. We're going to try to fight 2 wars on 2 different continents with those resources. It didn't look good. But this is where the spirit of the American people rose up. Civilian manufacturers quickly converted from that of civilian production to military production, and we began to churn out massive amounts of war materials. By 1945, American manufacturers, and a lot of them were women, Rosie the Rivers, that can-do attitude. They had built over 80,000 airplanes. They had constructed over 2,500 ships. Wow. And over 16 million Americans had joined the military. And if that is not a reason to call these people America's greatest generation, I do not know any other reason. Fantastic. Now we're fighting an enemy of the Pacific that we don't really know that much about, other than they're sneaky. We knew a little bit about the Germans because we fought them in World War I. Now, what better way to defeat your enemy than to study them at first? So at this time, we're going to turn the program over to the Japanese commander, and he's going to talk to you about that from the Japanese perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
皆さんはおはようございます。お元気ですか？日本がない。
No Japanese speakers? Well, good morning. Good
morning.
English then. How are you all doing today? Good. Glad to see you're all in the shade. You should enjoy the show. It's my job to take you all on a journey through history with the goal of gaining a more comprehensive understanding of Japan's military history, her time in the modern world, and the relationship that Japan has shared throughout the decades with the United States. And to do this, to gain this perspective, we must go further back in history from that day of infamy, the one we all know, Pearl Harbor, and see what happened between Japan and the United States, Japan and the West, in the years prior. So here we are in 1853. A United States admiral named Commodore Perry sails with a fleet of the most modern gunboats that the United States Navy has to show into Tokyo Bay. He takes these ships and he turns the cannons on board inland. He delivers an ultimatum to the shogun and the emperor of Japan, the military and spiritual leaders respectively of a unified feudal society at the time. He declared that a trade agreement must be drafted exclusively between Japan and the United States, with Japan's resources on call for cheap to the United States' economic will. Or unmitigated destruction would be unleashed starting in Tokyo on Japan's coastal cities with said gunboats. This showed force and power was both intimidating and intriguing to Japan, who had never seen the like such weaponry employed in a naval situation before. Japan relented, opening her borders for the first time in 200 years to trade freely with another nation. This period of self-isolation was instituted by Tokugawa Ieyasu, a warlord in Japan who, after a long civil war, unified the country. He realized that to retain peace, society needed to be controlled. Foreign influences had to be removed from society because they tipped the balance of power. Foreign religions and political ideologies had to go because they put ideas into the common people that would cause them to rebel. The drug trade, such as the opium trade, had to be eradicated as it undermined the foundation of society. The working people became addicted to the drugs and were no longer productive. Modern military technology had to go because firearms in the hands of the uneducated masses could tip the scales again, eliminating the ruling class with relative ease without too much skill. Upon entering the world stage for the first time in this 200 years, Japan realized two things: that to avoid the fate of its neighbor, China, and many other countries in Southeast Asia, that is, to avoid becoming a colony of the United States or a protectorate of another Western nation, two things needed to be accomplished. They were the modernization of the Japanese economy to compete on a level playing field on a global scale. The second would be the modernization of the military, the Navy, and the Army, so that men like Commodore Perry couldn't sail superior ships or land superior troops on Japan's soil and push us around, forcing us to agree to things that might not be fair. In a short number of years, all of this was accomplished by sending the best and brightest students and military advisors Japan had to offer to military academies and universities around the world, bringing back the best of the West, as it were, to the newly awakened country. We fast forward a few years to the 1880s, during the First Sino-Japanese War, where a contingent of Japanese army troops under control of British officers fought the Chinese, crushing the Boxer Rebellion. These troops performed well and used for the first time rifles, handguns, cannons exclusively, rather than having a mix of archaic weapons that were seasoned and assisted by modern technology. These rifles, this modern military technology, was proven, and further developments were made in these areas until we come to 1904. In the territorial dispute over a weak Korea, which had power vacuum after China left, between Tsarist Russia and Japan. War broke out over this new territory ready for the picking. And in a short amount of time, the Russians were defeated on both fronts, crushed at the siege of Port Arthur on land, and in the Sea of Japan. The Tsarist navy was mostly destroyed and limped back to Russia. This shocked the world because it was the first time in the history of modern warfare that a non-Western, non-white opponent defeated an established power in the field of military combat. We fast forward to World War I, which is farther in the future, close to our own time, where Japan assists the Allies guarding their shipping lanes in Southeast Asia from the Germans. A small amount of naval troops were landed at the port of Tsingtao in China, eradicating the Germans from there and gaining an important gateway to mainland China. However, all of these good relationships sprinkled and helped along by trade, went to south in the 1930s when, as we all know, the Great Depression rocked world economies. Japan's growing industrial base and its large population now relying on railways, modern farming technologies, and trade with other nations was no longer exempt from the effects of the economy downfall. So, we soon realized that in order to sustain the level of growth experienced since the 1850s, Japan had to look outside the borders of the home island. As we all know, Japan is made up of an archipelago, a series of islands where natural resources are scarce. A lot of hills there, so farmland is a premium. Not many natural resources under the soil. No oil, no rubber could be found there. Not domestically anyway. So, a military plan was drafted to strike west into China. During the 1930s, a civil war was being fought there in China between nationalist and communist factions, vying for control mostly in the south of the country where the large cities were. Large swaths of territory in northern China were left unguarded and ripe for the picking. Warlords ravaged the populace, and they were craving for any semblance of order that a modern government could provide, a modern military to protect them, to give them organization and to help build their nation. So Japan stepped in, quickly sweeping aside any nationalists or communists who would provide resistance, and setting up a territory there called Manchuria, under Japanese control. Resources could then be siphoned off from vast amounts of farmland, forests, and huge populations of Chinese willing to work for any pay, to feed the people, and continue to grow the nation. However, with all of this fighting going on, Chinese on Chinese, Chinese on Japanese, even domestically, Chinese warlords and civilians destroying each other, many horrible accounts and pictures of civilian populations being destroyed by military technology were published in Western media outlets around the world. Great outcry was brought up in the United Nations, League of Nations, and in the political arena, prompting Great Britain and the United States in particular to put sanctions upon Japan. The terms were that they must pull all of their troops out of China and give up all territories to the nationalists, because as any good Western nation was at the time, they didn't want the communists to win. These terms were no longer acceptable to Japan, who had become reliant on the resources siphoned from northern China. And when trade was cut off with the United States and Great Britain, oil was no longer available. So, as it worked prior, a new military plan was drafted to strike south and take these resources that could no longer be diplomatically acquired directly from their sources. That is, the colonies of Western nations in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, starting with the Dutch East Indies with its rich oil reserves, British-held Malaya and Singapore, Eastern India, French Indochina, which is now Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and farther south, the United States-held Philippine Islands, a de facto colony of the United States with rich oil reserves and rubber plantations. Following a preemptive strike that would hopefully destroy the United States Navy and kowtow the President of the United States for staying out of the war, the finest light infantry force, supported by the best Navy in the region, would sweep south and absorb all of these colonies that were lightly staffed and ready for the picking into the new Japanese Empire. You'll notice that myself and soldiers accompanying me are all wearing lightweight cotton uniforms. This is a must for those of us who are deployed in the South Seas area of operations, i.e. the Pacific Theater, as temperatures are quite austere, often in excess of 100 degrees with very high humidity. Around our path are lightweight woolen wraps, putties in English, maki kyahan in Japanese. And we're familiar to history buffs, those of you in the crowd are familiar with United States military history. From World War I, the doughboys in Europe wore these lightweight woolen wraps to support their calves when in the field, to prevent debris from getting in our footwear and pants. They could also be removed to serve as a tourniquet or a bandage in a pinch, should a soldier or his comrade be wounded far from an aid station or a medic. Around their waists, these riflemen wear representations of the web gear at the time issued to Japanese military forces. Each front pouch holds 30 rounds of ammunition for their primary small arm, and in the rear, an additional 60 rounds of ammunition in an oiler bottle to support and clean the weapons and equipment. On their hips, a cloth haversack to carry personal items and other incidentals, rations, letters from home, toiletries, more ammunition, whatever the soldier deems necessary to keep close to his person when maneuvering in